This past church service, I was able to read scripture from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. This story is about two followers that were walking along the road processing everything that had happened with Jesus. Then a stranger appears, and he begins to talk to them. He begins to explain to them through the scriptures why everything that happened was supposed to happen. And the disciples are impressed. They're amazed at what this man knows, but they don't recognize it's Jesus. I find myself getting frustrated with this story. Why wouldn't these followers recognize it was Jesus? I get that it didn't physically look like him, but wouldn't they sense an attitude, or maybe Jesus had a catchphrase he said, or just a feeling from him that maybe this is Jesus with us right now? But they don't recognize him until the very end when Jesus breaks bread with them. And then he just disappears like that. As I was thinking more about this during this time, I began to realize that maybe I relate to them a little bit more than I thought I did. I feel like I'm in constant process mode with this quarantine. There's always new do's and new don'ts, new protocols, new things to do when you go to stores. It feels like every day it all changes. Even with the stay-at-home order, we don't quite know what it's going to look like, and it's going to constantly changing or adapting as we go. It feels like I am in a constant stage of processing. I related even more to this when I was out on a walk outside with my daughter. We were outside looking at all the flowers that were growing in our yard. We just moved to this house in the fall, so we haven't gotten to experience this house and yard during springtime. So we really didn't have any idea of what flowers were going to appear or what plants were going to be growing. That's the one thing I love about spring, is that just random colors pop up out of nowhere that you may have not realized were once there. However, the thing that I hate about spring is when I see plants or trees with these beautiful, colorful flowers, and then within a few weeks' time, they just turn into green. I don't understand why that happens. And it frustrates me because you see this beautiful flower and you think, wow, that's so pretty. But then in the back of my mind, I think, okay, well, how long is it going to be pretty for before it turns into ugly for me? And I related to this during this quarantine time because I began to think, I'm starting to feel a sense of hope that something is going to go back to normal, that maybe we'll go back to being able to go out to restaurants or being able to be with our friends without being paranoid. But in the back of my mind, I think, when is that going to happen? And even when it's allowed, is it really going to be normal? When am I going to be able to go to a store without worrying about having to wear a mask or gloves or whatever else? So even though I feel a glimmer of hope at this point, it's kind of got a dark cloud of disappointment and bitterness around it too. I'm just not sure when things can be hopeful again. But when I go back to the story of Emmaus and I look through at what the disciples did, they were processing it together. They didn't just go off by themselves alone. A lot happened to them, and a lot happened to the man that they were following. So they had many things to process, but they didn't do it alone. The other thing I realized was that Jesus showed them the big picture. They didn't recognize it was Jesus when he was doing it, but they did listen to him, and he walked them through all the scriptures to help them see the bigger picture of it all. Am I going to recognize Jesus when he speaks to me? Now, Jesus may not give us the entire picture of why this happened or how it happened or what we're supposed to do about it, but I feel like at some point we're all going to hear something from Jesus if we haven't already. So the question is, are we listening to him? Are we taking time to recognize him during this? But what I'm processing through all this is that I shouldn't put my hope into something that's not everlasting. I know it sounds so cheesy, but really, I can't put my hope into something that's unsure. But I know that God is sure, and I know that I can put my hope in him. So despite everything that's going on around me, I need to take the time to recognize him. Recognizing him in nature when I go on walks. Recognizing him in the scriptures when I read it. Whatever it is, I need to make sure that I'm recognizing Jesus and putting my hope in him, and not putting hope in stay-at-home orders going up or being able to have my freedom. I need to put my hope in Jesus. So my challenge for you today is to find some hope. What is something that God is speaking to you that you can be hopeful in? And process this. Process this with people you know. Process it with us as staff. We're all in this together.